You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, Episode 587, Lineage.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm John Champion. Each week on Mission Log, we look deep into an episode of Star Trek, picking it apart for the morals, meanings, and messages, and seeing if the whole thing stands the test of time.
This week, Lineage, the one where B'Elanna and Tom find out they're having a baby, but B'Elanna has some serious concerns. You thought it was going to be Tom, right? You thought Tom was going to be the one having issues about raising a child, right?
Yeah, I might have thought that actually right from the beginning, but stay tuned for surprises. I'll be right back with trivia, but first, here's Norman to tell you all how to reach us.
We would love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and on Instagram and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord, with near daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways to help your favorite podcasts is to leave a 5-star rating and a review at Apple or your preferred podcast platform. And remember, your comments could be used on the show. And now, here's John Champion with this week's trimester report.
Okay, let's learn about Lineage. This episode was written by James Caan, and no, not our first time seeing his name as the sole credit for a Voyager story. Recently, we discussed his writing with critical care, and it's worth remembering before we get into the discussion today that James also had the sole writing credit for the TNG episode, The Masterpiece Society. Oh, maybe a little connective DNA there. Pun intended. This was directed by Peter Lauritsen. Longtime fans have probably known Peter's name since the beginning of the Berman era. He was right there from the start of TNG as a co-producer, and he occupied many roles with the franchise ever since up through Enterprise. Now, we discussed his directorial work before on TNG with The Inner Light and Gambit Part 1. He was also second unit director on the feature films Star Trek First Contact and Star Trek Insurrection. So, time to meet our guest stars, and we do have guest stars, but none of them are actually on Voyager itself. They're all present in B'Elanna's flashbacks to a childhood camping trip. Among those players are Uncle Carl, played by Javier Grajeda, or Grajeda. All right.
Oh, that's Grajeda.
Grajeda,
sure. Yeah.
Among those players are Uncle Carl, played by Javier Grajeda, here making his only Trek appearance, but Javier has a pretty solid streak of recurring roles on popular series like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and even soap operas like Generations and Days of Our Lives, and don't leave out that absolute TV classic, VIP. Cousin Michael is played by Gilbert Leal, who just has a handful of professional credits, this being among the earliest. In 2003, he provided his voice for episodes of the animated Rocket Power, and after that, nothing else that we can find. Cousin Dean, the one with the worm, is played by Paul Robert Langdon, and he made his professional debut in 1995 with the feature film My Family, and worked consistently through the 90s and into the early 2000s, primarily with TV guest roles. Those wrap up shortly after this episode of Voyager, with a few spots on Touched by an Angel, Lizzie McGuire, and voicing a character for the animated Jackie Chan Adventures. Cousin Elizabeth is played by Nicole Sarah Fellows, and like our previous two young performers, her credits are limited to the 90s and early 2000s, wrapping up with an episode of Boston Public in 2002. Now, a very significant role, though, came to her in 1997 when Nicole played young Ripley in Alien Resurrection, so it's kind of nice to see a mini streak of playing versions of strong sci-fi women. Young B'Elanna is played by Jessica Gaona, and we did actually see her very briefly in another episode of Voyager. She was one of the children seen in the episode Memorial, and she went uncredited for that one, just as she did even earlier when she was a Maquis child in the DS9 episode For the Uniform. Her most recent credit is from 2005 with the Nickelodeon series Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. And finally, Juan Garcia plays John Torres. He got his start in the late 1980s and appeared in a number of films, including the feature debut of director Robert Rodriguez with 1992's El Mariachi. You can catch him in some other genre TV appearances with Quantum Leap and Alien Nation, and you can add Voyager back to the list because he will be back for one more episode before we wrap up the season.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. Are you ready to change the baby? And by change the baby, of course we mean changing the diapers, not anything else.
Prologue. B'Elanna is in about as good a mood as Voyager has ever seen, smiling and greeting her crewmates. That is, until she finds Icheb and Seven in engineering doing efficient engineering things without her permission. Her mood sours, and she even misses a step, losing balance as she walks. Icheb scans her and finds another life form inside B'Elanna. Seven calls the doctor to say she'll be escorting B'Elanna to sickbay because it looks like she's pregnant. Act 1. The doctor makes it official. B'Elanna is pregnant. He explains her recent fainting spell as the result of some classic Klingon human metabolic tension, typical growing pains when your DNA is at war with itself. But the baby's healthy, and mood swings are to be expected. Tom and B'Elanna decide to keep the news under wraps for now, so of course the entire ship finds out by lunchtime. Neelix throws Tom a surprise applause party in the mess hall after hearing the news from Icheb. He even volunteers to be godfather, noting his experience with Naomi Wildman. Tom promises to consider it. Meanwhile, B'Elanna's trying to maintain some normalcy in engineering, but Chakotay and Janeway corner her with beaming congratulations and offers of time off. She insists she's fine. Tom, now in full dad prep mode, even tracks down Voyager's best, maybe only, father figure, Tuvok, for parenting advice. He warns Tom about the paradoxes of parenthood, which Tom totally misinterprets as, I should start hanging out in the Jeffries tubes more often. Back in their quarters, Tom tries for a romantic dinner, but B'Elanna's mood has shifted. She's frustrated by the crew's unsolicited advice, Janeway's protective instincts, and especially Tom's comment about her becoming a Klingon mother. She catches herself. It's only a mood swing after all. But just as things start to settle, the doctor calls. Their baby will have a minor spinal issue, easily corrected with genetic editing. He shows them on a holographic projection of the baby's spine. Then it's the worst kind of gender reveal party when the doctor blurts it out. They're having a girl. Tom asks if they can extrapolate a projection of what the baby will look like, not just the spine, and he is over the moon to see her. But B'Elanna, she looks right at the hologram's Klingon forehead ridges. That hits a little deeper. A childhood memory surfaces, her human father on a camping trip, commenting how much B'Elanna reminds him of her mother. Act 2. Later that night, B'Elanna lies in bed beside Tom, but her mind drifts back to that camping trip. She remembers feeling isolated from her cousins, convinced that they didn't like her, even as her dad tried to reassure her. The next day in sickbay, B'Elanna undergoes the spinal treatment and flashes back again to the camping trip, this time to the time her cousin Dean dropped a worm on her sandwich as a joke. His comment about Klingons liking their food live hit a nerve, and young B'Elanna lost her temper. Cousin Elizabeth tried to help, but B'Elanna ran off humiliated and hurt. Shaken from the memory, B'Elanna heads to the holodeck and loads the image of her future daughter. She studies the ridges, the dark hair. Then she starts editing. One by one, she deletes the genetic sequences to lighten her hair, smooth out the ridges, until the little girl staring back at her looks completely human. She saves the program and locks it. Act 3. Back in sickbay, B'Elanna asks the doctor to make more genetic changes to their unborn daughter beyond the spinal correction. He refuses. There's no medical justification, and worse, unnecessary changes could affect the child's health. He urges her to talk to Tom first. Catching up on the Delta Flyer, that conversation does not go well. Tom flatly refuses, and when he realizes this is about B'Elanna's own childhood trauma, he tries to reassure her. Their daughter won't be ostracized. Voyager is a diverse ship. But B'Elanna isn't convinced. Their disagreement lands him in Janeway's ready room, where B'Elanna compares her request to what Janeway did for 7 of 9. Janeway mercifully cuts them off before she or any of the rest of us have to hear any more of it, reminding them that this isn't an ethical debate, it's a marital one, and she won't overrule the doctor's judgment. On the way back to their quarters, B'Elanna and Tom argue again, until Tom finds himself crashing on Harry's couch. B'Elanna lies awake in her quarters and remembers her father, how he tried to comfort her after she ran off, and how she told him that she wished she wasn't Klingon. Her dad gave the age-old advice to be less sensitive and return to the campfire while B'Elanna sat up reading alone. Act 4. B'Elanna remembers another moment from that camping trip, overhearing her father tell Uncle Carl that life with 2 Klingons, his wife and daughter, was more than he bargained for. His mom had warned him not to marry Miral, and now he was living with a lot of intensity. The next day at work, Chakotay interrupts B'Elanna's thoughts with a suggestion. Name the baby after him, the feminine version, of course, and maybe let him be the godfather because Kuchimoya. B'Elanna says she'll think about it. He invites her for coffee, but when they run into Tom in the corridor, Chakotay gets a sudden case of forgetting something and leaves them to talk. Tom and B'Elanna quietly reconcile just in time for another call from the doctor. In sickbay, the doctor has changed his tune. He now believes the genetic modifications B'Elanna requested are medically necessary. He cites potential metabolic complications and schedules the procedure for the next morning. Tom doesn't quite get it, and he takes the doctor's findings to Icheb and Seven. Sure enough, Icheb finds the genetic edits to be a mess, totally unlike the doctor's usual work. A quick scan reveals the truth. Someone has tampered with his program. When Tom tries to find B'Elanna, she doesn't answer. The computer tells him that she's in sickbay. Act 5. Tom brings Tuvok and a security team to sickbay where they have to force the doors open. They get in only to find a force field protecting the surgical bay. Tuvok calls Harry to cut power, and the field drops. When Tom accuses the doctor of being compromised, B'Elanna protests, but Tuvok has the doctor deactivate himself for safety's sake. Alone with B'Elanna, Tom gets to the heart of it. She tells him about that camping trip, how she overheard her father say life with 2 Klingons was too much. She confronted him, told him to leave if he couldn't handle it. 12 days later, he did. B'Elanna has carried that guilt ever since, terrified that Tom might do the same. But Tom assures her he's not her father. He's not going anywhere, and he hopes their daughter is just as Klingon as her mom. Later, B'Elanna restores the doctor's program and apologizes. He forgives her just as the baby kicks. She asks if he wants to be godfather. I mean, given the alternatives. The doctor is glad to accept. When she asks to see the holographic projection again, ridges and all, B'Elanna smiles. She's cute, isn't she? The end.
I love being able to see your through line edge of your recap, John.
Thank you.
Or is it Lineage?
Or Lineage, yeah. It's like, you know, if you fast forward several years to us doing Strange New Worlds, it's either hegemony or hegemony.
Right.
And this one, I decided we can call it Lineage or Lineage.
If we get to that point, you and I will be the Stadler and Waldorf of Star Trek podcasting.
So, oh God, that would be great. That's us. That's the future.
Yeah.
We kick off this episode with something that reminds me of TOS, which is that if you ever saw a smiling Spock, something was up.
Oh, totally.
Something was wrong.
Right.
And now you got happy B'Elanna, so happy and just smiling. Hey, how's it going? I'm the new B'Elanna.
Mm-hmm.
And then she encounters E7, and you know that things are going to go off a cliff right there.
Totally. I mean, I know that it was planned, but I was a little nervous for B'Elanna doing kind of like the stunt down the stairs, you know, when she just faints. And I was like, watch those ankles.
Yeah.
When Seven scans B'Elanna with the tricorder, Seven says, I believe she's pregnant, but would the scans actually confirm that she would be pregnant?
Yeah. You know, if you get to a point in the 24th century that you have such a thing as a tricorder that can do all sorts of amazing diagnostics and scientific analysis, if it can't get pregnancy right, it's a binary proposition.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a useful tricorder.
A plastic straw today and get pregnancy right. So I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And the one tricorder, the one company tricorder.
That could get it right.
That could get it right.
Yeah, right. I think so. All right. Very entertaining because Voyager is such a small ship that, of course, the news travels fast. It's a fun
think so.
To have. Yeah. Yeah.
Funny when the doctor says to Tom and B'Elanna, Klingon and human metabolisms sometimes clash. And then B'Elanna says, yeah, they do, or something like that. Right. And there obviously was a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And I'm like, come on, guys, this is a family show here, right?
Yeah. Time out. Exactly. Speaking of interesting turns of phrases, Neelix says, good news has no clothes. And I wish that this was a gag since the beginning, where Neelix is optimistic, he is positive, he's a bad cook, he's the ambassador now, but just let that be a character trait that he just has phrases that make no sense to anyone but himself.
Right.
I think that would be a fun bit.
It's like his version of Hakuna Matata.
Right?
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
What was the blue liquid that Neelix and Tom were toasting? I don't think it was Romulan ale. It was too pale blue to be Romulan ale.
Yeah. And where would they have gotten it? From Chakotay's secret stash?
Ooh, you know what? That would have been really interesting, given the fact that Neelix was always kind of poking around in there. That's
exactly.
You're so smart. I mean, you trace the lineage of that alcohol all the way back to like an episode or two. So
yeah,
there's the lineage of Chakotay's secret stash.
Now, there's something really entertaining about Tom, going to different people, but going to Tuvok, the least sensitive person by definition of everybody. But honestly, we've seen him be a dad, and he's pretty good. And if he's going to teach Tom anything, he's got to teach him the Tuvok finger,
right?
That would be the thing to teach him.
That was a missed opportunity, but a hidden gem here in terms of opportunities. Anticipate paradox is what Tuvok says. That is probably one of the front runners for one of our best album names to date.
Yeah.
I loved watching Harry finally give Tom a hard time. That was nice.
Yeah.
Now,
thank you for that.
Down the corridor. Now, this here was delivered with such panache, right? So Chakotay says to B'Elanna, have you checked the warp core for radiation leaks today? And she goes, no, why? And then Chakotay says, you have a certain glow about you. I'm like, dude, too smooth.
That might be the best Chakotay.
I think it was Too Smooth Chakotay, or we call it Akuchamoya y'all Chakotay.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
There you go.
That's right. I really get the idea of not wanting unsolicited health advice. I can hardly stand that when I have a cold.
Right.
So I can only imagine how much worse that is for someone who is pregnant. Everybody feels the need to just jump in. Well, you need to do this. You should do that. So that definitely rings true.
I'm not being defensive. You're being defensive. I'm not being defensive. It's not me. It's you, right?
Are you seeing this? Right. Okay. The CG baby. I'm a mixed feeling. It's a cool idea. Weird to determine how you extrapolate all of that. But I guess, look, if people get excited now about seeing blurry sonograms, then that is a huge step forward.
When did the Ally McBeal dancing digital baby come out.
Oh, well, I think it was maybe shortly after this.
But I'm just wondering if it's like at that time.
Yeah,
It was kind of like
not too much longer.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So now we have not just a gender reveal, but a genetic reveal as well.
Right.
Right. So how do you do that? I mean, what color would the baby's gender and genetic, makeup be? Would it be light purple?
Yeah, maybe.
Yep. Just think about that kind of that blood blob in Star Trek 6 floating across the doctor's sickbay.
I love that so much.
Right.
Yeah.
Expanding the doctor's database is just uploading a file, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's about it.
So you can be literally like the quadrant's foremost expert in obstetrics and pediatrics by, I don't know, a 60-second or less download of a file.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
I assume they got the good Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this introduction to young B'Elanna of her engineering the lure on her dad's fishing pole.
Yeah.
It's so sweet and it's so in character. It's
Yeah.
great. Cut back to present day. Peanut butter toast. First of all, big fan of that. Yeah, I mean, that's just that is a go-to breakfast for me many times, but that is so Tom Speed.
Yeah, right.
but then I have to ask, okay, did he replicate a vintage toaster? Was that part of the thing? Like, B'Elanna made the TV,
right,
and he replicated a vintage toaster, but then they got to put it back somewhere after they use it. I'm a bit disappointed it's not a space toaster.
Right.
There was an opportunity for that. They had kind of the space peanut butter container, which I think we've seen before. I think Janeway had that container before.
Right. I mean, Tom just basically grabbed that container and looked at Janeway and said, "Be back in a jiff."
Oh, my God. I cannot believe you.
You hate me.
I know you believe you. But here's the question. Can't you just replicate hot toast? Because I get the impetus for I want to have that toaster here so it's hot when it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
You could just replicate hot toast, or do you just replicate toast with the peanut butter already on it?
The replicator is really interesting because sometimes you want to go through kind of like the routine of doing something traditional, like spreading, peanut butter on toast. Now, the big question is, I don't know what kind of a peanut butter aficionado that Tom is.
Yeah.
With all of his, expertise in the 20th century, but if he's putting smooth peanut butter on that toast, that's insulting. I mean,
there's crunchy or there's wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We're going to get more email about that than we have any other comment on Mission Log.
Probably.
All right. The doctor is singing to the fetus, or planning to sing to the fetus. I love that of course.
It's like baby Mozart.
Yeah.
That whole technology. Cut to the kids being cruel and racist to the mixed race girl in a campground. Yeah, I thought this was supposed to be science fiction and not reality.
Yeah, I guess kids are terrible in the future too. Yeah.
I would anticipate paradox with that. I can't begin to tell you. Actually, I will go into much more detail later on, but watching B'Elanna literally strip down the genetic code of her daughter's genetic projection was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was. Yeah. It was hard to watch. And I mean, not to put a too fine a point on it, but she literally turned her daughter into the young, white, blonde, female version of a child.
Yeah.
Also, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Put a pin in that. Great line. Does my daughter need a third lung to survive? I mean, it sounds kind of cool if you can get one.
Yeah.
So I would say, don't knock it. And then I like the doctor's line here. There's no reason to arbitrarily remove genetic traits. Absolutely, we're going to get back to that because it speaks to the moment that really affected you. Mm-hmm. So, put a pin in that.
Well, I mean, there are two very key sequences, I think, in this episode, and this is one of them. One I will, describe later on. Mm-hmm. But in this scene, B'Elanna says to the doctor, "My daughter is not going to be a Klingon warrior," and the doctor says, "With all due respect, you have no idea what your daughter is going to be."
Yes,
that hit me right between the eyes, so specifically. It's just
it hit you right in the ridges.
Right in the ridges, right in my ruffles. So,
right. by the way, and this is something that I feel like maybe we tackle in Discord later because other people can chime in about canon, but if there is a Starfleet ban on genetically altered beings serving in Starfleet, what about parents who choose to alter their kids?
Right.
Yeah, are we concerned about that anymore? Okay.
So
anyway,
are we going to canon smooth that like peanut butter?
Maybe, maybe, or just like those ridges.
Chunky. So Janeway says to B'Elanna, what you're asking for is ethically questionable. The doctor has reservations. Your husband is against it. So here's the big question. What about the eugenics accords? Right? Because it's the Federation programmed doctor on a Federation ship conceived by Federation parents, right? For the most part.
Yeah.
Born on the ship, which is sovereign Federation territory in the Delta Quadrant. So,
yeah,
I mean, this is another, again, multi-hour conversation about how is this any different than what Bashir was being put through when they hunted him down for genetic manipulation because of his parents.
See, 100%.
Right?
100%. So they're a little weird there to have this plot line given this complicated history. But, yeah, I think we can take the episode on its own terms, of course.
Right.
We'll get into that, too. Not a whole lot of Janeway in this episode, but what we get of Janeway, I love. And Janeway bringing the stop it, both of you energy, I needed that.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite moments with her. Harry's a sax man now.
What can I say? Asians love their sax.
I've heard.
Yeah.
I've heard that.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially Harry Kim. All right. Now, Tom, actually speaking the truth, okay, how is this going to work out? Asking himself, like, oh my gosh, what happens next, and how do I navigate this? And then Harry's first reaction is like, oh yeah, no problem, your kid's gonna be great. Like, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna take her on shuttle rides. Where Tom's actually having this moment, but actually, the end of that scene, Harry does give good advice, which is try empathy.
Yeah. Try listening.
I know it's this new concept for you, Tom, but the lead into that moment I found very entertaining. Definitely in the camping trip, I don't know if anybody has pointed this out yet, they've got a space thermos.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they're having coffee.
It was a literal space thermos.
It was. Yeah.
No pun intended, even though there's a pun intended. Okay, so B'Elanna's father says, about the teasing children, the ones that was it Dean?
Dean, you little.
Yeah. So he's just doing what 11-year-olds do. I'm sure B'Elanna overreacted. And then Torres' brother Carl says, "What makes you say that?" And he says, "She's too damn sensitive." I'm like, "Come on, man. You can't gaslight your own child."
Yeah.
From earshot of a conversation.
Yeah.
That's not, I don't know. That did not sit with me well.
No, I don't think it's supposed to. Yeah. I got to say, they could do a lot worse than Chakotay as a godfather, since we introduced that idea here too, because that child is going to need as much bland calmness as they can get. Yeah. So maybe Uncle Chakotay is the right guy to watch this child.
So Tay is the female version of Chakotay. That's what he said. Taya?
Taya.
Yeah. So is it Chakotaya or just Taya?
Oh, that's interesting, because he just says Taya.
Yeah.
But maybe it is Chakotaya.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's an interesting name. Yeah. I like that.
But Chakotay, again, with just the nonstop one-liners.
Yes.
When he's walking with B'Elanna and then Tom, kind of saunters in and Chakotay's like, whoops, forgot my pad. I'm going to about face and leave this awkwardness behind.
Totally using that from now on.
Yeah.
I love it. I really like Tom asking Icheb to read the document or the kind of the report on genetics, because the modern equivalent, that's like asking ChatGPT to review a contract that you don't understand.
Right. Yeah.
Because I'll take a complicated document. I've talked about it on the show before, like my car owner's manual. I don't understand any of it. So I'm going to ask you, smart computer AI algorithm, to figure it out for me. Yeah. So there we go. And honestly, big surprise to me first time watching the show, and I put it here with 3 big question marks. Oh, the doctor's program has been tampered with. Shouldn't there be protocols against that? I guess not when you're dealing with one of the smartest people on the ship.
Right, and the one who can actually access his code and has on occasion, in a variety of different ways, and the mobile emitter as well. So she kind of knows, she has the keys to the kingdom, in that sense. But I also wonder, knowing that the doctor would react a certain way, and then knowing that he would say, what does your husband feel about that? When she handed the doctor the pad of information and say, please review my research, do you think that was coded in a way where it automatically started rewriting the doctor's program from that pad?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be.
Because if so, I'm not saying that's the case, but if so, that is a lot of premeditated, premeditated planning going on to do what she wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Which underlines kind of like the psychology of what we're going to talk about later. Yeah. In the flashback, young B'Elanna, says to her father, I heard what you said to Uncle Carl. And then her father said, you shouldn't be listening to private conversations. That's your takeaway?
God.
To your daughter, who is obviously hurt about what you said, about what you said, right?
Dad seems like, the sensitive, nice guy, but he makes some poor choices.
That's not my fault. It's your fault. I was like, no, it's not her fault that she heard it. It's her fault that you said it. I mean, it's your fault that you said it, that she heard it.
Exactly. Tom, in the sick bay, Tom says, I'm never going to leave you. Oh, Tom, no. So, look, I know that's the right thing to say at that moment. I'm fully not confident in you. But yeah.
But it's just that whole scene, like where it starts with the whole, you're not my father, that B'Elanna yells at Tom. And that whole, like the armor that she's been so wrapped in for like the last 7 seasons, it's just cracked wide open.
Yeah.
And I think both Roxanne and Robbie, they rose to the occasion and they played off each other perfectly.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Now, when it comes to B'Elanna into this episode, I do think that B'Elanna, I don't know, should be relieved of duty for a little while. And I mean, does she not get punished for messing with the doctor's program? Like, she only needs to answer to the doctor for that?
Yeah.
Not to, the captain?
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot going on there. And also, like, when you really think about B'Elanna's confession, I mean, I'm not even sure if, like, Cybok could take away that much pain.
Don't just edit your baby and save over them. Save a copy of your baby under a different file name. That's just IT best practices.
So this is going to be a really interesting discussion because I was not prepared for this episode. There's a lot of ground, I guess, to cover in so many ways.
So, yeah. Like, in the best sense of what we do on Mission Log, there's almost too much.
Yeah.
So you got to pick and choose your battles a little, and I feel like we can say what we're going to say, and then it's going to be up to everybody else to say, oh, but what about this? Right. And really explore this character this way, and all of that is very legit.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of, but what about? But what about?
But what about? Yeah. Yes. Yeah, all of that.
And I'm not sure if that lends to a really strong episode or really, something that is just too demanding on the palate, like too many notes, as Mozart would have said.
Yeah.
To the Emperor of Austria. But let's dial this all back. Let's start with something really easy and see if we can just kind of ease our way into like a deeper discussion. So I'm no Sigmund Freud, but let's start with this softball. So both Tom and B'Elanna, from what I understand now, have major father anxiety issues, daddy issues.
Yes.
And do you think that with this revelation in this episode, they finally realized why they came together in the first place? Did they see something in each of them that couldn't identify that just made them a little bit more, almost kind of like their souls more attractive to each other, their energy?
Oh, interesting.
There are like these conversations or like these studies of people of certain addictions gravitating towards each other. They just have a look, feel, a way, a cadence, a mannerism or something like that they recognize in their counterpart at the time, that becomes a relationship or, wherever it evolves into. But I didn't see it during the course of kind of like how they came together as a couple. It's obviously, they were about to die together, and obviously that forges a very specific relationship. But is it something that's below the surface that was always there?
That's an interesting idea. And not to jump to the end, right at the beginning of our discussion here, but it seems almost like that is a missing bit of dialogue, whether it should have been in this episode or planted in some episodes before. But I like that train of thought, because Tom has got this chip on his shoulder about his father, and he rebels in his ways. And B'Elanna, what we've been introduced to so far is this, I guess, difficult way to reconcile her Klingon past. And we've really explored a lot of that. And to think way, way, way back to Faces.
I had to. Right? That's like our schisms, right?
It is. Yeah. That's so good. And we've really just looked at it through that angle. And what we never got up until now was a deep dive into what does the human side of B'Elanna look like. And very smart, very clever choice here to not just chalk up all the difficult emotions on the Klingon side. No. B'Elanna's got to deal with stuff from the human side as well, because she's got a father here who probably through no malice, but just through some questionable parenting skills, says and does these things that really leave a mark. They definitely have this lasting impact on B'Elanna. So what I wish we had is some moment where, in the past we've had Tom make some comment, deal with something from Admiral Paris. And B'Elanna has sort of talked him out of it, like, oh, you can just do your own thing and be your own guy and don't let that get to you, But I think what we were missing is a moment for B'Elanna to actually connect with Tom in that regard, even if we just planted the seed way, way back and let B'Elanna actually say something like, yeah, I had a difficult time with my father too, and it kind of pains me to this day. Mm-hmm. Or let Tom early on reveal to B'Elanna, like, hey, this is something that I am getting past. This is something that I am also working through. Look, not in those words. I'm not writing a script here, because that's not the way it should be done. But I think there's a real opportunity here to put a button on what you're saying. And instead, what we get is, we get a more sensitive side of Tom for sure, but I think we missed the point of connection.
Yeah.
Where you could really drive home, oh, no, here's why these two can actually be good for each other.
We have the catharsis and we have the confession, and obviously the bearing of souls. But we don't.
Instead of just saying, like, no, I'm here for you.
Right. Yeah.
Like sometimes you need to hear that, sure. But we've also spent a lot of time. We spent 6 years with these people.
Right. Yeah. No, I get that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's difficult because it reveals the kind of problem that B'Elanna has with her father. It opens up her self-loathing and all of these things that were layered upon her as a child, whereas Tom's is a little different. It's coming from this other place where Paris was this like taskmaster and nothing's ever good enough for him, and he's really this kind of authoritarian. And John Torres is not that, but he also missed the mark in other ways. He didn't truly try to understand and console and have empathy for his daughter. She was just kind of an inconvenience.
I think that's maybe where Chakotay kind of fills in the blank as like an uncle, right? Where she provides, she he provides her the consistency that she didn't have.
Chatuncle. Chunkle.
Somebody please do something with that. I mean, it's not like McClunky or whatever that was.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Akuche Mongol? No, I mean, that's...
But they both need some mental health counseling, and we've talked about that on Voyager as much as we did on DS9. I mean, thank goodness the Enterprise D had Deanna Troi, but wow, you really need those moments. I love that ending scene as well, that she needs to have this tearful confession moment with Tom about those issues, but I then keep asking myself, well, is that enough to make it right? Because Tom has his own stuff to deal with. And think about throughout this episode, Tom has just been completely pushed out of the decision-making. He has been denied the ability to have empathy or understanding. He doesn't always make the best decisions himself, but he is also forced into a corner here.
Yeah.
So I worry. Like I still don't think it's going to be sunshine and roses in the future. I'm glad that we had this hurdle to cross, but what about the next one, and then the next one, and the next one?
Yeah. And I hope they address that in the series. I don't know if they will, but there's a fairly long topic that I've prepared for the show, and I did a fair amount of research on it because I personally was not familiar with or comfortable with talking about certain things that triggered me in B'Elanna's behavior. So I spent, some time looking at kind of like the psychology of what was, really what was affecting me, not just in B'Elanna's reactions, but some of the nuances in the writing. So I don't know. I mean, is this a good time for me to do that?
You take it away, because I feel like the things that you're about to hit on are probably, at least a portion of it, are in my notes as well. And I want you to run with it, and forgive me if I jump in every now and then.
Oh, please do. But again, it's like, please bear with me while I do this, because there's just an interesting way of presenting a certain psychological study of what B'Elanna was going through that triggered some of my personal traumas, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But what I want to reference here in this segment is what I believe is the complications of the God complex, right? So I'm going to start off with a Bible passage, something I never do, but I thought it was really interesting to start off with this. In the Bible, in Genesis 1:27, it states, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them." And somewhere way in the future, mankind created genetic engineering to improve mankind in their image, and thus either improving God's work or disproving God's existence. So there's a scene in this episode that really bothered and concerned me, and I needed to make sure that I was putting my reactions to what I believe this episode was telling me in the proper emotional and, more importantly, academic context. Now, I apologize for reading this verbatim, but I really want to be clear about what I'm saying here, and I'm not always the very best at improvising these types of thoughts. After the second act break, after B'Elanna has stripped away all genetic markers from her daughter, leaving behind the facsimile of a white, blonde, young girl with no trace of Klingon heritage whatsoever, we come to the third act with this scene where B'Elanna tells the doctor about, does she need a third lung? And the doctor says, with all due respect, you have no idea what your daughter's going to be.
Yeah.
And this is where I had a deeper dive to investigate, or why I had to do a deeper dive to investigate why B'Elanna made so many extreme and emotionally fueled choices in this episode. More specifically, how B'Elanna's choices, whether she realizes it or not, will ultimately rob her own baby of any choice before the baby is even born. Now, this may sound controversial, so I will just say, take this with a trigger warning before, I get into more of this scientific explanation. But I think that it may be a result, B'Elanna's behavior may be a result of so many different types of trauma that she's suffering, has suffered, and is still suffering. And perhaps her choices are influenced in a way that I have recently come to learn as scientific racism. In my research, using these search terms, the eugenics wars, the eugenics accords, racism, generational trauma, and mixed race children, the internet directed me to this specific article from the National Human Genome Research Institute titled Eugenics and Scientific Racism, updated May 18th, 2022. The subheading of this article, which is categorized as a quote-unquote fact sheet, states, Eugenics is an inaccurate theory linked to historical and present-day forms of discrimination, racism, ableism, and colonialism. It has persisted in policies and beliefs around the world, including the United States. The paper, in and of itself, is fascinating and is summarized in the following excerpt that says, do eugenics and scientific racism still exist? Yes. While eugenics movements especially flourished during the 3 decades before the end of World War II, eugenics practices such as involuntary sterilizations, forced institutionalization, social ostracization, and stigma were common in many states until at least the 1970s, that in some instances have continued into the present in various forms. With the completion of the Human Genome Project, or HGP, and, more recently, advances in genomic screening technologies, there is some concern about whether generating an increasing amount of genomic information in the prenatal setting would lead to new societal pressures to terminate pregnancies where the fetus is at heightened risk for genetic disorders such as Down syndrome and spina bifida. Or, to editorialize this episode, in this case, the curvature of B'Elanna's spine and her baby's possible spine.
Yeah.
The emergence of statistical techniques such as polygenic risk scores that can estimate risks for more genetically complex disorders have raised concerns among ethicists that their use in the context of in vitro fertilization and pre-implementation genetic diagnosis. The possible genomic-based screenings of embryos for behavioral, psychological, and/or intellectual traits would be reminiscent of the history of eugenics in its attempt to eliminate certain individuals. Some geneticists view both genomic screening and genetic counseling as an extension of eugenics. I'm going to continue, so please indulge me just a little bit more.
Yeah, please. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Some further research from the National Human Genome Research Institute defines scientific racism, updated on July 29th, 2025, as this: a historical pattern of ideologies that generate pseudo-scientific racist beliefs that perpetually influences racial bias and discrimination in science and research. Leading scientists across scientific institutions in the 19th and early 20th centuries were proponents of such ideologies. By the mid-20th century, pseudo-scientific racist beliefs were widely disproven. However, evidence shows that scientific racism persists in science and research. And then lastly, genetic discrimination, as defined by this same website, refers to the unequal treatment of individuals based on an aspect of their genetic code or genome, such as the risk for genetic disorder. Genetic discrimination can involve such genomic information being used against individuals in a variety of circumstances, such as employment, health, disability, insurance status, or education or healthcare. So, unfortunately, and this is my summarization of what I've learned, and this is now going to expand our dialogue here on how this affects the episode or is in relation to. So unfortunately, to summarize, it was perhaps a master's thesis worth of material for hundreds of papers. We don't have the time to even scratch the tip of the iceberg here.
Right.
But now, from what we know of these examples and how B'Elanna has carried so many layers of personal trauma throughout her whole life, is it really surprising that the choices she made to protect her child were an extreme, reflexive response to making sure her baby would never suffer as she suffered?
Well, I think, by the way, I'm glad that you looked up all of that, because that is all fascinating stuff. And it really drives home the point that when we talk about eugenics and we think about this thing that's rooted in the 19th century and kind of had petered out by the middle of the 20th century, it's still with us in different ways, this twisted version of understanding genetics. You hit home on this idea that it sort of exists in two realms. There's the very, very understandable idea of you take somebody like B'Elanna, who's been hurt, who's been traumatized, who is full of self-loathing from the set of experiences that she brings with her. And you also bring on top of that the feeling that any parent has that they want to protect their child from any outside force that would force their child to go through the same thing that the parent did when they were a child. That is a very natural and understandable reaction. Where we get really murky in this is that, there might be things that you could teach a child if you're aware enough to help steer them in a way so that they don't make mistakes that you did, they don't react maybe in ways that you did, so that if they experience bullying, trauma, whatever it is outside, that maybe they stand a better chance than you did when you went through the same thing. All right. So I think these are all natural instincts. These are all understandable motivations, But when you expand this out to a human scale problem, and you expand it out to then a human scale problem that has a scientific cause, cure, an interest in outcome here, then you open yourself up for every possibility of that technology to be perverted and counterproductive, to say the least. So I guess if we're trying to find anywhere that we can draw a line, and that's part of what that article that you read really gets to, if we're looking for anywhere to draw a line, how do we ethically, morally, compassionately determine what is driven by personal interest? So here's a mother who has had these experiences that she can mostly chalk up to how others treated her in the body she was born in, right? Okay. Then there's also legitimate medical concerns. So if you have the ability to say genetically at an embryonic stage, prevent someone from being born blind. Okay? Is that, now there's nothing wrong with somebody who is born blind, certainly not. But is this something that a parent could rightfully, understandably say, you know what? If I could change that and not have my child when they are born be blind, I would like to correct that in the genetic code. Then how many steps do you get to where, as you mentioned in the article, spina bifida, Down syndrome, the genetically carried conditions that people have and people are cared for, and certainly people with Down syndrome lead long and full lives, but have different needs from people who don't have that condition. The one that I wrote down here in my notes, which are of a similar thread to yours, well, how do we consider neurodivergent traits that somebody else may call a disease, whereas somebody with a different perspective may say, no, this is just part of the realm of human neural development. And there may be people who have different abilities, different expressions. Do we actually treat that as a disease down the road because we can? Because you could throw a genetic switch and say, you know what? No, this person who expresses autism in one way, well, they won't do that anymore. Or their child who potentially would have that trait won't do that because, you know what? I think it's too difficult for them. Or maybe more to the point for someone like B'Elanna, I think it's too difficult for someone like me.
Mm-hmm.
as it was for me, and then to see somebody else have to go through that. So the lines here are massively blurry. And I don't think anybody would, as the episode very cleverly sets up, I don't think any parent would ever say, no, don't edit the genetic code to correct for, spinal curvature that could eventually lead to more serious problems. I don't think any of us would disagree with that at all. From B'Elanna's perspective, she sees everything else, everything as an outward trait, as being a problem. But that gets back to her. What is her personal experience? And I think a major problem here that we would address it with today is looking at the consent or lack of consent involved. So choosing to change an unborn child's genetic expression in a physical trait, like a forehead ridge, color of hair, or whatever, that obviously speaks to what the parent was going through and not the child. That is an assumption that has to do with them, But let's fast forward to a real life analog of that, right? People get surgeries. People change their visual appearance for all manner of reasons. And sometimes it is to fit who they think they are, and that makes them more comfortable. But there's a really dark side of that as well. Any of that can be a dark thing as well. But there is a side of that where I remember probably 15, 20 years ago, and maybe it's still going on today, but it's when I became aware of it, that there is a trend of people changing their quote-unquote racial look in order to assimilate, right? And what I remember of it, and you may be able to speak to it better than I can, but what I remember of it is showing examples of Asians who had changed things like eye shape and changed other physical aspects just to assimilate better, just to look a little more Western.
Yes.
And, okay, so what are we addressing? Well, we're addressing, like B'Elanna here, a self-loathing, a discomfort. But what it does is it serves to wipe out a cultural heritage. It wipes out who that person is. At the same time, you're an adult. You can afford to do this to yourself. Who am I to say you're wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I suppose I don't have a say in that. I think it's weird. I think it's unfortunate. I think maybe there were some psychological hurdles to go through first before arriving at that. But you've seen what I'm talking about, right?
Yep. I mean,
yeah.
When it comes back to the word eugenics, I know in Star Trek it sounds sexy and it sounds
So it's the thing that kicked off the war, and we all know what happened to Khan.
Right.
That's a great
the
movie.
eugenics wars, But I don't think, just to kind of cap this, the word eugenics in and of itself is nefarious because what's essentially saying it's the genetic manipulation to create a very specific master race.
And let's be very clear that the people who were the proponents of eugenics were white, Western, wealthy. These were people who had attained a certain social status and decided that they could execute this plan locally and globally.
Mm-hmm. But that's what makes B'Elanna's choice so heartbreaking in that scene where she strips not just the Klingon identity away from the child, but the cultural Latino identity away from the child.
Yeah.
By, again, stripping the child of her dark hair, her darker skin, and replacing it with blonde hair and very whiter skin.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is exactly what eugenics was originally created to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I've mentioned it before on the show. There's a Steven Soderbergh show that was on 10 years ago or so called The Nick, and takes place in a hospital in New York in 1900 through about 1902. And one of the subplots in that is the rise of eugenics and how quickly and easily medical scientific professionals, not all, but certainly enough of them, adopted this theory. Not only did they adopt that theory, but then they put into practice eugenics methods, literally, like you mentioned in your article here, sterilizing people against their will, and then institutionalizing people who were undesirable, who had undesirable traits. That's all on this big sociopolitical, historical level. I think what's so interesting about this show is boiling that down to an individual experience. And you could probably sit somebody like B'Elanna in a classroom and say the history of eugenics is fraught. It is a stain on human development. And she would understand that. And at the same time, she could also probably hold in her head that doing something like altering her own daughter's genetic code is the quote-unquote right thing to do, because she is going to save her daughter from a lifetime of pain and hurt that she has. And I think that's one of the ultimate tragedies of dealing with a character like her here.
What did we learn today? If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you don't like your doctor, you can reprogram your doctor. Maybe we better hear what John and Norman found.
That was actually a really fascinating discussion. I did not know where it was going to go with the research that I presented to you, and then how you're going to kind of use that in a way to craft and share your opinion. So thank you for that, John. But now we're at the end of Lineage.
Yes.
And I do think that we don't have the bandwidth or time or schedule to continue this conversation into multiple podcasts, because that's, I think, what this episode truly needs in order to just understand the density and complexity of what's going on here. But that's not for me to talk about right now. That's for you to talk about, Ryan, because we're here at the end and we're going to ask ourselves, does this episode hold up? Does it stand the test of time, as we do with every mission log? And then we're going to finish our conversation with morals, meanings, and messages, and if we were able to find any. Yeah, I'm not going to spoil the ending. I think that we're going to talk about a few special things. But let's get started with the first part with John.
Well, look, I mean, here's the difficulty from the last segment is that I took notes, and I'm sure you did too, that I just never even got to, because you could pull on any one of these threads and keep going and turn it into a very long conversation about the topics brought up here. And I love that when we get obviously, a piece of Star Trek that does that for us, but I like that with any provocative story or provocative science fiction. This is one of those great episodes where there's not a single right answer to some of the problems being faced here. There are some right and wrong answers about behaviors, but just understanding and examining character motivations and how they got to where they are and why they may feel one way or the other. This show did a really great job of taking complex scientific, ethical, moral issues and putting them onto a human level. And yes, I'm saying human also including B'Elanna and Klingons in that as well. So human with a little h. When I first started watching this episode, I was not into it. And I'm talking about just like being into Act 1, Act 2. And that was my gut reaction, right? Because I feel like Voyager has done both Tom and B'Elanna wrong, and there's still problems in the writing for these two characters. But they were able to, and I guess when I say they, I mean James Caan, but I'm sure that other people on the writing staff contributed and tweaked here too. They were able to pack so many ideas into dialogue here in a 45-minute show. It's topical, it's smart, and yeah, we do have some of those conversations that are just a bit too on the nose, but they really found a way to tell the story about medical ethics and about personal trauma and make it dramatically compelling. As a story doing what it set out to do, I think it's an A+. We get good performances. It is directed well. The pacing, again, once you get past some of this early act stuff, I think the pacing is actually quite good. And I got to hand it to, first of all, there's our A-team here anyway, who are given good material. But even our guest players, yeah, all right, put them on a camping trip. Might seem a little contrived and a little cheesy, but it actually sells exactly what you need to understand these characters. That works quite well here, too. I think my only complaint is that it's almost too much to try to wrap up here in 45 minutes. All of this stuff about B'Elanna, we got hints of it in the past, but nothing about her father until now.
I think that phrase, there's a lot to unpack here, I think started in this episode.
Yeah. And I'm glad we got it because, oh my gosh, it justifies so much that we've had about Tom and B'Elanna up until now. But like we were saying before, there are scenes and dialogue missing about Tom and B'Elanna finding this connective thread. The whole medical ethics of it, the genetic issue of it all, I feel like needed to be a couple of parts at least. But then the problem there is that if you treat Voyager like Voyager, if you turn that into a 2-part episode, well, we probably get another 20 minutes of just some alien of the week shooting at Voyager. And I don't need that. What I needed was just to focus on this in this episode. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, that it's A+ for execution, A+ for performances, A+ for taking on really deep topics that you and I were only able to scratch the surface on. But at the end of the day, it is just too much. It's too much to take on. So it holds up because there is an effort here to do what Star Trek does well. Take big, complicated issues, put them into a science fiction story, where then we can talk about them for far longer than the episode actually lasts. But the part of me, the minority part of me that says this does not hold up is the part that's saying oh, but if we had only explored these ideas earlier, if only we'd spent some time to let the ideas germinate and debate a bit longer, that would have been so much more satisfying.
Yeah.
But regardless, I have to say that the episode does hold up because, it's A+ for effort, and thanks for giving us something compelling to chew on. So how about you?
I mean, we're very much on the same page. I wrote a lot of notes for this part of the segment, and I kind of scrapped all of it and saying, you know what? Yes. Yeah. The episode stands up. Okay. Without hesitation. Yes, it stands up. This is the kind of episode I think that it really only happens a very few times in individual seasons of Star Trek, or any of your fandoms really, but especially with Star Trek because of, of the subject matter and the topics, the tone. I think the only thing, and like you said, the only thing that really is my problem with this episode is that it just came too late. It appears too late in the narrative of Tom and B'Elanna's arc. It would have been something I think that would have been really good, maybe season 5. Where this would be the crucible to their relationship moving forward. Yeah, and how their storylines would develop, and would this be what really kind of separated them as individuals, this philosophical debate between what they want to do or not do for their child. And that would have been really compelling storytelling. But we watch this over and over again for what we do on Mission Log. And every time I watched this episode, I found something new to talk about to this level. Right. And we can only pick so many battles when it comes to finding a topic that is compelling to us, personal to us, hopefully, because it's a little bit easier to talk about it on a personal nature, but also, to the depth that, that topic allows us to go. And I think that you could have picked any of these topics because, it starts off with something that I think is very, very, personal to any parent nowadays. Do you have the right or do you not have the right to alter the future of your unborn child? That is a very relative topic to any day, especially today. But and that's why I think that this episode is, I wouldn't say that it's my favorite episode, and it's not in my top favorites, but I do think that Lineage, the episode, is probably one of the most important episodes in all of Voyager, maybe perhaps all of Star Trek for what it is saying. Because, again, this is about that very fragile and very vulnerable time in a child's life, an unborn child's life, or at the start of a child's life where they're forging relationships with family or with friends, or they're starting to forge their religious beliefs or their sexual preferences or their political identities. These are all global conversations that are happening right now. Right?
Yeah.
Not in 2000, but right now in 2025. And as these global discussions move forward, maybe they are the crux of how humanity moves forward while we're watching movements that are challenging and taking away personal rights, and those personal rights are being replaced with perhaps the prevailing religious dogmatisms of today or political, governmental trappings of today. I'm trying to be as delicate as I can about what I'm trying to say.
It's okay. Yeah.
But if you're a fan of the Orville, please watch Orville Season 1, Episode 3. The title is About a Girl. And then you watch our very own Jessica Lynn Verde and Captain Mike Richards discuss that episode on Mission Log the Orville, because regarding this topic, the topic that we're talking about in Lineage, that might be, I should say, About a Girl might be one of the best science fiction episodes about what we're talking about I've seen in recent years, and Lineage is right up there with it. Robbie and Roxanne are phenomenal in this episode. Let's be honest. They knew, as the kids say, they knew the assignment. They brought their A game. They were the rising tide that lifted each other's boats. It's so funny. I write in my notebook, I hand scratch all of my stuff and then I translate it into text. But I wrote this big note that basically said, and I texted this to Charlotte, and I think she got a chuckle out of it. This is the Robbie and Roxanne episode I've been waiting for.
Yes.
Circle.
6.5 seasons.
Underline. And the funny thing is, as I wrap this up, I've heard that like season 7 is the forgettable season, the mess season, or the unmemorable season. But season 7, for me, has given me imperfection and critical care and Lineage so far, aside from like a couple other really noteworthy episodes. But these episodes, wow, they're fantastic. I don't know why people are sleeping on season 7, because I actually think it's very good so far. Yeah. But let's get into the tip of the iceberg again.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. It is so flush with good ideas. And again, I think no really easy answers, just saying like, here is a problem. Here are people who are suffering from the baggage that they bring with them, the upbringings that they had, and the motivations that are personal to them. And here also is this context of them, in particular B'Elanna, but both B'Elanna and Tom becoming parents and what that means. And then here also is this medical, ethical context we can put around it, which you can trace back to eugenics and before, but specifically we're going to put a pin in it and call it eugenics, and extrapolating what that looks like in the future. So, again, this isn't one of those like, bonk bonk on the head, save the whales kind of things. But boy, these are heavy, deep topics. And mostly what I wrote down is just, here's a thread, and here's another thread, and here's this other idea that we can continue to contemplate in Discord or in After Dark, or just, when you see us individually and personally, we can talk about it again. But these were the topics that interested me. There is very clearly this very personal story of overcoming one's own trauma, or maybe overcoming isn't quite the right word, but just acknowledging and dealing with, accepting and trying to work through one's own trauma, and being able to share that with a loved one, hopefully for the purpose of getting to better understanding. Tom and B'Elanna have not always had a very understanding relationship, and there are moments in this where they don't, but that is a huge moment at the end of this episode where there is finally some care and concern and compassion between the two based on just truth. There is the idea of them negotiating that relationship where they don't see eye to eye. And first we don't see eye to eye because here is a thing that I want to do that the other person doesn't want to do, but it's also about how they interact, how they argue. And even when they go to Janeway as the arbiter, she's like, nope, I'm not going to do this. This is on you. See ya. There is this story about the inner child who is still with the adult who is now becoming a parent, and asking yourself, are you really capable of that? Because that inner child is still there. How do you deal with that? And how do you then make good decisions raising your own? There is a huge question here about bodily autonomy and privacy. So there's the medical privacy, the ethics of what B'Elanna is discussing with the doctor. And of course, we've established that the ship is a small place and everybody hears everything. There is also, as I talked about before, the consent issue. Well, B'Elanna is making a decision about her body and about the life in her body. But this is also being made before this new life will actually be a child who can make decisions on their own. And there's something really dangerous in that territory about deciding, well, I can change this, I can change this, I can change this, and make that potential life into something that I want, that I think is better. I was also interested in the idea of B'Elanna, shopping around for the answer that she wanted, instead of just dealing with the reality in front of her. And people do this in every area of their lives, but especially they do it when it comes to medical advice and medical procedures. And it is especially problematic there. I was also interested in this thread about kids who don't really get adult relationships, because that is very true. That's just part of being a kid. You're not meant to understand it on every level, but at the same time, you do internalize, you take in the things that you see around you. And even if you don't understand the context, sometimes you make it about yourself, because you can't help when you're, whatever she was, 12 years old at the time, and hearing her father say these things. Of course, that informs how she grows up and how she sees relationships in her adult life. And then what was science fiction in 2001 when this came out is within relatively easy scientific grasp now, or in the near future, and that is the ethics of genetic alteration or programming the baby that you want. Like I said, there are things that we can change that maybe we should change, but we're going to have a whole other ethical, moral debate about that when we can make more and more precise and custom changes to our children and their children and their children beyond them. The human race may look very different, and I don't know that we make good enough decisions to be prepared for that. Norman, what did you pick up here?
So I'm no expert in any of the things that we're talking about right now, right?
It's hard to be.
It's, I can only, really, pass this through the prism of my own experience. But these are kind of like the societal and sociological issues that I saw in my takeaway, of this episode. And they were pretty much kind of like at the forefront. There are marital issues. There are communication and relationships issues. There are parenting fears. There's the issues that you were talking about with genetic engineering, genetic manipulation, what I talked about with the God complex behavior, mixed race bigotry, generational trauma, reverse racism, sexism, gender identity, gender fluidity, familial acceptance, conditional love, not unconditional love, but conditional love. Yeah, and I was just thinking about this when you were talking, the abandonment trauma, that B'Elanna suffered and is still suffering because of what she needed Tom to say. And and you can't never promise, like say, I'll never leave you. You can't make that promise. There's just so much, again, to unpack in this episode, but that's why this story is so wonderful to watch, because of its complexities. But what I do love about the possible moral meaning or message that they're trying to put in all of these different topics is this really kind of like low key approach to what Star Trek means in terms of its inclusion for everyone to be accepted. We're going to do a little role play here, John.
Okay.
This is the scene. I'm going to set up the scene. This is the scene where B'Elanna is trying to explain to Tom why she has so many fears about her daughter being of a mixed heritage. I'll play B'Elanna and then you can play Tom.
Sure.
So B'Elanna starts off this conversation with, I was treated like a monster.
That isn't going to happen to our daughter. Everyone on Voyager will accept her for who she really is.
That's easy for you to say. You're human.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning you don't understand what it's like.
Okay, then tell me.
And that really just, it grabbed me, because that's a situation where if you don't have really good communication, I mean, especially in a marriage, these things can really kind of spin out of control. And who gets caught in the middle? Sometimes, usually the child. And in this case, it is the unborn child, right? But what I want to focus on from this conversation is where this goes next. So in my experience, the Star Trek world that we want to exist, there is that, and there is also the reality from where we watch this future take shape. For Tom, in universe, he believes that their daughter will be the epitome of why Starfleet and the Federation exists. If it weren't for the Federation accepting the Klingon Empire as their allies, after the Khitomer Accords, then B'Elanna wouldn't be born. Her parents never would have met. Tom and B'Elanna would never have met, and then they wouldn't have gotten married, and then their child would never be born. That's just kind of like looking at the lineage of it, right? Not pardon the pun, but that is the lineage of the story. But B'Elanna is still traumatized by the real abuse she suffered as a child. And she still sees the Federation, and follow me here, folks, because this is a deep one, as it Bohr saw Kirk and his crew in Star Trek VI, when Chekhov said at the dinner scene, "We do believe all planets have a sovereign claim to inalienable human rights." And Azitber really snapped back very quickly, and she says, "Inalien? If you could only hear yourselves. Human rights. Why, the very name is racist. The Federation is no more than a Homo sapiens only club."
I love that scene. Yeah.
And that is very much in line with B'Elanna's feelings when she says to Tom, when people around you are all one way and you're not, you can't help feeling like there's something wrong with you. One way equals, as in the one way she changed she changed the look of her child to look like in the holodeck, white and blonde.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what generational trauma can do. Allow me to share a personal story with you and the audience. As an Asian kid growing up in a predominantly traditional small Midwestern town, not 140 people, but predominantly one way.
Yeah.
When it came to enduring racism in the Midwest, I can describe exactly how it felt, because it's exactly what B'Elanna said verbatim. When the people around you are all one way and you're not, you can't help feeling like there's something wrong with you. And not only that, but her cousins, like, they're cruel. They were cruel boys who didn't think their teasing wasn't doing any harm. But believe me, to her and to me and to so many people that have experienced this, it did. I just didn't know how much psychological damage that it was doing to me, because I didn't know any better. Neither did B'Elanna. And at times, especially at that very vulnerable age, when I literally looked up and down at my own bathroom mirror and wished that I had a way to genetically alter so many things about my own body, which I thought would make my life easier, better, more acceptable, more like everyone else, to be like the kind of child that B'Elanna believed to be perfect, white, blonde, not mixed or not a different race. These are the beautiful people, right? The popular people. Or so we're led to believe, right? With every square inch of marketing plastering every single square inch out there, and especially on social media today, which is way, way worse than when I grew up, right? This is the quote unquote ideal human being, men or women, that you should look like in every excruciating fine pixel and detail. So I wanted that in a very painful way, but that wouldn't make me me. I think there's a part of all of us that you come to understand that in adult terms at a certain time, right? And we should accept everyone for who they are and who they will become and what they will bring to their journey and our collective story of humanity, right? We need to embrace them. We need to embrace and celebrate their diversity, but more so today than before, we need to protect their individuality and their rights. Sometimes even from those who think they know what is best for their children. And to paraphrase one of my favorite quotes from Gene Roddenberry, if humanity is to survive, it will have learned to take a delight in the essential differences between humanity and between cultures. It will learn that differences in ideas and attitudes are a delight, part of life's exciting variety, not something to fear. That's the spirit of human adventure. That's the spirit of Star Trek.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, repentance.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Chris Garris, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shabel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takachi. We're editing babies, editing the Doctor. Did anyone get out of this show without being edited? End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.